Good morning. I'd like to call the Kankakee County Board meeting for August 9th to order. Today's invocation is from Steve Lear.
Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we gather today to represent all of the people of Kankakee County. May our discussion and decision-making be respectful of differing views. May our decisions be focused on the common good of all people in the county. You have blessed this county with much fertile soil, flowing rivers, areas of forest and green pastures, and a diversity of people. Guide our decisions to preserve what you have created. Lead our decisions that they may better the lives of all who live in this county. Our thanks go to your Spirit that guides the actions of so many who work to preserve your creation. Our praise goes to your Spirit that guides so many people to better the lives in this county. Finally, we ask your protection on all who work in county government, especially those who are first responders. Amen.
Amen. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which stands one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice. All right. Roll call, sir.
Mr. Hess. Present. Mr. Tholen. Present. Mrs. Polk.
Present.
Mr. Snipes. Present. Mr. Seroy.
Present.
Mr. Lear.
Present.
Mrs. Weber. Mrs. Peters. Present. Mrs. Parker. Mr. Fairfield. Present. Mr. Carrico. Mr. Eckhoff. Present. Mr. Swanson. Mr. Featherling. Present. Mr. Donnell. Mr. Miller. Present. Mr. Long. Present. Mr. Kirkstra. Present. Mr. Hunter. Present. Ms. Bryan. Mr. Collins. Ms. Hudson. Present. Mr. Smith. Present. Mr. Alexander Hildebrand. Present. Mr. Gowler. Mr. Raymond. Present. Ms. Foster. Present. Mr. Wheeler.
Present.
We have a quorum.
We have a quorum. We have one request for a remote meeting, and it will be one of those evergreen until Mr. Dunnell can rejoin us. He just recovered from the one knee and then blew the other one out. So maybe, hopefully, got a 2-for-1 special on from the doctor on that one, or a punch card. But I don't think he minds me saying. But he'll be laid up for a little while again. Just probably this one 6 to 8 weeks. Is there a motion to Mr. Eckhoff, Mr. Long? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed. All meetings, all committees until he can rejoin us. Thank you. Do we have any public commentary today? Seeing none, no vacancy appointments, presentations, certificates of appreciation. Jennifer Spears from probation, 15 years. And Michelle Fitz from schools, 15 years. So thank you both for your service. The minutes of the last meeting, July 12th, 2022. Is there a motion to approve? Mr. Hunter?
Polk.
Ms. Polk with a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Well, we don't have minutes yet, but we won't have a special meeting. Mr. Coughlin, it occurs to me, do we have to have the printed minutes before we approve the minutes from the meeting we just had 10 minutes ago?
Well, you've got the printed
This right here?
Right there.
Call this the minutes?
Yes.
Okay. Is there a motion to approve, use this document as the minutes? Okay. Mr. Alexander and Ms. Weber, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Because I don't think we'll have another one of those kind of meetings in the future to do this, so we want to try to get it in. Thank you. Claims Committee report.
Mr. Chairman, members of the County Board, your Committee on County Claims would beg leave to report they have examined the following claims presented and recommend payment. Clerk is hereby authorized and directed to issue orders to the several claimants. Total monthly claims of $21,280,100.48.
Alrighty, is there a motion on that? Mr. Lear, second. Let's go with Mr. Fairfield. Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Hess. Aye. Mr. Tholen. Aye. Mrs. Polk.
Aye.
Mr. Snipes. Aye. Mr. Seroy. Aye. Mr. Lear. Aye. Mrs. Weber. Aye. Mrs. Peters. Mr. Fairfield. Aye. Mr. Carrico. Aye. Mr. Eckhoff. Aye. Mr. Featherling. Aye. Mr. Miller. Aye. Mr. Long. Aye. Mr. Kirkstra. Aye. Mr. Hunter. Aye. Ms. Hudson. Mr. Smith. Mr. Hildebrand. Mr. Raymond. Ms. Foster. Mr. Wheeler.
Aye. Motion carries. Department reports, please.
County Collector's Monthly Report for June 2022, total cash and bank and investments, $16,151,549.49. County Treasurer's Monthly Report for June 2022, tax operating account First American Bank, ending balance $3,528,851.41. For First American Bank, ending balance of $186,875.35. For the tax e-pay account for First American Bank, the ending balance is $595,159.27. And Illinois funds for U.S. Bank, ending balance $11,840,663.46. Coroner's Monthly Report for June 2022, total calls 100, coroner's cases 15, autopsies 15, toxicology 15, 1 donation, 44 hospice, 39 referral, 66 cremations, 5 x-rays, 1 COVID-19, and 11 pending. Coroner's Income Summary Report for June 2022, total of $6,858.36. Circuit Clerk Cash Book for month ending June 2022, total dispersed $323,357.71. Recorder's Monthly Report for June 2022, disbursement fees paid to the County Treasurer of $143,745.26. County Clerk's Monthly Report for June 2022, total of $27,058.04. Monthly Building Division Report, total permits 116, total fees $38,086. Animal Control Monthly Report for June 2022, total of $45,730 in the IPTIP Building Fund, $510.17. Total animals handled 92.
All righty. Is there a motion to combine and approve? Mr. Eckhoff, Ms. Hudson with the second. All those in favor say aye. Those
Aye.
opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Under consent agenda, is there any that need to be considered separately of those items? Need a second to look it over. Second time, anything to be considered separately? Motion to combine and approve then? Mr. Long, second? We'll go with Mr. Smith. If we can get those right in the record, please, sir.
Certainly. The appointment of John Scoffsman to the St. Anne Fire Protection District. The appointment of Colton Eckhoff to the Kankakee County Regional Planning Commission. The appointment of Stephen Bukowski to the Kankakee County Historic Preservation Commission. The reappointment of Larry Kirkstra to the Kankakee County GIS Committee. Declaration of surplus equipment for the Kankakee County Coroner's Office. And holidays to be observed by the offices of Kankakee County for calendar year 2023.
All right, roll call vote, please.
Mr. Hess. Mr. Tholen. Mrs. Polk.
Aye.
Mr. Snipes. Mr. Seroy. Mr. Lear. Mrs. Weber. Mrs. Peters. Mr. Fairfield. Mr. Carrico. Mr. Eckhoff. Mr. Featherling. Mr. Miller. Mr. Long. Mr. Kirkstra. Mr. Hunter. Ms. Hudson. Mr. Smith. Mr. Hildebrand. Mr. Raymond. Ms. Foster. Mr. Wheeler.
Aye. Motion carries. Moving on, highway and buildings, if we can get the title read in the record, please.
Resolution of the County Board of Kankakee County, Illinois for resolution and ordinance for the establishment of an altered speed zone on 4000 West Road from 700 North to 1100 North in Limestone Road District.
You have a motion, Mr. Carrico? How about a second? Mr. Long? Any questions about this? Pretty straightforward. We did the study. All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Under PZA, if we can get that first one read in the record.
Resolution of the County Board of Kankakee County, Illinois regarding ZBA case 20-05, variance to section 121-99.11.A.3.V lot width in the A1 Agriculture District in section 35 of Janier Township.
All righty. Delbert sashayed up to the front here. So do do you have a, sorry, did you have a presentation on that?
Yes, there is.
Okay.
Motion.
This is a request by Neil Trudeau, who's the property owner. He would like to divide off the existing farmstead from the farm using a farmstead exemption. It's a 5-acre tract with a house and outbuildings. It's kind of an unusual variance request in the fact that the variance is because he has too much land. It's a lot width variance, and the farmstead exemption limits lot width at 499 feet. And because of the configuration of the buildings, the pond, the best they could do was 690 feet. Both the zoning board and planning and zoning recommend approval of this variance.
All right, is there a motion to approve on this one first? Mr. Eckhoff, second with Mr. Hess. Questions? All right, it's pretty straightforward, but all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. All righty, 2206, you can get that one.
ZBA case 2206, special use permit 13C, single family home in the R1 single family residential district in section 10 of Aroma Township.
All right, first, we have a motion on this one here. Mr. Featherling to approve. Second? Go with Mr. Fairfield, and we will want to make sure, yeah, this is the only two items. Go ahead, please.
Okay. Mr. Mark Wells purchased the 7-acre tract outlined in red on the screen up there. The property is zoned R1 single family residential. Since it's a newly created lot after 2002, when our special use permit regulations went into effect, it requires a special use permit to build a house on any parcel larger than 2 acres in that district. So Mr. Wells is requesting that a special use permit be issued so that he can build a home on that property. It's located on 1500 South Road in Aroma Township, just past the railroad tracks. Both zoning board and planning and zoning recommend the approval.
Any questions there? How many acres was that again? I apologize.
I believe it's 7.
Okay. Alrighty, I guess if we're ready, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you. Alrighty. Thanks, Del. All right, under executive, if we get the next item read, please, into the record.
Resolution of the County Board of Kankakee County, Illinois to approve the Kankakee Regional Land Bank Staffing Services Agreement through November 2024.
We're going to start a motion on this one here before we get going. Mr. Featherling, Mr. Tholen with a second. Does anyone need to be brought up to speed on this? We've talked about it in multiple committee meetings. I can give a brief overview if you would like, or you can just ask questions, however you want to go with this. So, an abridged version, about a year ago, a little over, the city and the county created another governmental entity called the Land Bank. It's basically a mechanism to capture all these properties that have fallen off the tax rolls, repurpose them, wipe away liens, fines, all those things that makes redevelopment impossible, and then package them to a developer to redo those so they can get back on the tax rolls, whether it's residential or commercial. It's a really good tool. It's a tough business because the only way you keep the funds going is you, for example, acquire something for just a number, $1,000, and you got to sell it for $5,000. That other $4,000 goes to pay your operations and then go out and acquire some more property. So it's churn. It's not about making a big sale and splash. It's about getting those properties, like maybe on a corner over here that has been empty for 15 years and there's fines and liens, and we want to get that back on the tax rolls or get it to generating revenue taxes in some way, whether it's sales tax. So we looked for a way to fund the executive director position of this, because you have to have someone that has a real estate, finance, sales background, really organized. You got to have someone usher the deal through. It just can't be an unmanned organization. So there's a really good board in place of industry professionals. We're going to be adding people from other communities to that, a part of the advisory board. So we're finally to the point of starting to go out and we're addressing problems. When I say we, it's not even me or the mayor of Kankakee. It's this board. We have to have a place for the employee. So we looked at the model the Alliance afforded us with some tweaks, obviously. You know, they're not gonna have a separate location yet. We wanna put them here in our planning department, utilize that we already have the space, we already have the network. We need to provide them with benefits, and the pay is coming from the grants that the city of Kankakee is getting. So this agreement for the next 2.5 years, that's how they're gonna deposit, and may have already sent that check over, or will after this meeting, and put that in the bank so we can pay this individual and cover the overhead costs for the next couple of years. Our contribution is the benefits. And so that's a fixed amount. We have skin in the game. They will not necessarily report to this board and us, but they will report information to us, but they report to the Land Bank Board. So we have to basically, just like with the Alliance, every couple of years, reauthorize it, and then authorize the hiring of these positions, right? Just so they can be legally our employee. So the reporting responsibilities, obviously they're gonna be accountable to both the city of Kankakee and the county of what they're doing, but really their activities are governed by their board. This is just a way to take advantage of our HR office and everything else, because we have to have an employee. So, is there any questions about that setup? We can go into deeper, you know, anything you want to know that I'd be able to provide. Mr. Hunter.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The only comment I had, and I'll be redundant with respect to the composition of the board there. Victor Navarez is the only person of color on there, and I heard your words loud and clear in terms of additional entities or membership being expanded, and hopefully that additional minority representation will be made to that particular body. Thank you.
Yep. And that has been echoed within that body as well. So that has been discussed purposefully within the organization. So. Any other, yes, Ms. Foster,
Yeah,
please.
I would just like to piggyback on what Mr. Hunter said.
Could you talk into your microphone, please? I'm sorry.
Sorry. I just want to piggyback on what Mr. Hunter said. I think diversity is the key word. There's a lot of different people who live in the county, so they need to be represented as well.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, and I would say that once the foundation is set, other communities can join the land bank once they establish those parameters. They have to buy in just like everybody else does, but you know, the Mantinos and, you know, all of the different communities that may find value in this type of thing, you know, Bourbonnais, a lot of people have expressed interest already, and as far as the governments have, of being part of this, because they have those same type of pockets of I would say blighted properties, things that are just sitting there dead on the tax rolls, and that includes the Hopkins Park area as well. So that is very purposeful in where we're going to go down the road, or where they're going to go. So, any other thoughts about the funding mechanisms, where they're going to be housed, all of that kind of stuff? You know, work comp, all that's on us. You know, we're doing HR, we're doing payroll, we're doing all that stuff here, but the money is being supplied from the city of Kankakee's grants for this endeavor. Alrighty, no other questions. Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Hess.
Aye.
Mr. Tholen.
Aye.
Mrs. Polk.
Aye.
Mr. Snipes.
Aye.
Mr. Seroy.
Aye.
Mr. Lear.
Aye.
Mrs. Weber. Mrs. Peters.
Aye.
Mr. Fairfield.
Aye.
Mr. Carrico.
Aye.
Mr. Eckhoff.
Aye.
Mr. Featherling.
Aye.
Mr. Miller.
Aye.
Mr. Long.
Aye.
Mr. Kirkstra.
Aye.
Mr. Hunter. Ms. Hudson.
Aye.
Mr. Smith.
Aye.
Mr. Hildebrand.
Aye.
Mr. Raymond.
Aye.
Ms. Foster.
Aye.
Mr. Wheeler.
Aye. Motion carries. Let's see here, under finance, first item.
Resolution of the County Board of Kankakee County, Illinois, authorizing the county board chairman to sign a professional services proposal agreement for Aroma Park boat launch dredge design.
Is there a motion on that? Maybe Mr. Seroy?
So moved.
Yep, on the first, and then we'll go with Mr. Featherling on the second. You tell me how big of a description you need on this. Basically, for the first time that we can see, somebody's actually doing something about sediment in the river. We're actually going to remove sand from the river. This is the first step. I find things at the turn of century when they did some of this type of dredging, but they've never done anything now. And the time for talk is over. We're going to take action. So the first step is this agreement with Burke Engineering, who's heavily involved on the Indiana side of the Kankakee River issue. So they're well aware of what's going on over here. They're going to tell us basically all of the engineering, where we're going to be able to pull from, how much we can get out of there. That's a first, and then handle all the permitting and everything with DNR, Army Corps, everything moving forward. So they would be managing, and what you see in front of you is that proposal to do all of that stuff. So that's, I'm trying to find it in my packet here in case there's any specific questions, but please let me know if there are. Well, this is a necessary step to be able to actually define what the scope of work is with that project. Mr. Hunter?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Could you revisit the overall funding for this project that you have interfaced with Senator Joyce on? Could you mention that again?
Yes, it kind of goes back to the first meeting I had with the senator when he was first appointed. He asked for a top 10 of things that I wanted to get accomplished and the board wanted to get accomplished, and our first two items were the same. It was the work on the river and a gas pipeline to Hopkins Park. And this is a continuation of checking things off of that list. He went and got the $1 million for this dredging project, and without his help, we would not have a dime for it. We couldn't do anything. Now we're going to manage it. The second part of that was the $7 million that he also got for infrastructure work on the river. That's the second leg of this. None of that money can be spent on non-bondable items. So it has to be something that has like a 20-year shelf life. It can't be dredging. This $1 million is just to get that amenity of the Kankakee Valley Park District back and to be viable for the public and also for the rescue boats for Aroma Fire to get in the boatable part of the river. Right now they can't even get in there. So it checks so many different boxes on being good for the Park District, Aroma Park, City of Kankakee, the boaters, the boat clubs, and also the fire and safety part of this, the boaters themselves. So, and then again, we're not doing a study, we're not talking about it, we're doing it. So I hope that
yeah, and I think for those of you who are not really familiar with it, I had a recent conversation with the chairman about maybe doing a cruise and taking a look at some of the vicissitudes that plague the river. So maybe Judge Cunnington will let us use his pontoon boat.
He might make me write an inner tube next to it. But yeah, that's as long as I have a cooler and another inner tube, I think we'll be okay. Yeah. Yes, sir. Mr. Sierra.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is key for water safety on that side of the county. If there's a water accident, Aroma Fire would have to go all the way to the boat club by Cobb Park to launch their boat to rescue somebody. So when this boat launch was covered with sand, they could just, before that, they could just enter right there near their station. But now they have to go all the way through. And if you know the construction there by Grace Baptist over Waldron Road, that it might not be a timely to get to where they have to be. So it's key for water safety and for this community. So I applaud this board for going forward for that. Thank you.
Yep. Mr. Miller, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Along with the many benefits that have been mentioned, I'd like to add to it the thousands of farmland acres that drain into the river. The maintenance of the river and the removal of sand and sediment is tremendously beneficial to our agriculture community as well.
Well, and if they want some sand back to plow into their soils, if they're too rich, I know a guy. You know, I'm just saying.
We'll keep that in mind. Thanks.
Mr. Lear.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm very much supportive of this project because I see many benefits. As is true with almost every construction project I've ever known, this is going to still take time. We are acting, but before we see sand actually being brought out of the river, it's going to be several months.
We're looking at spring, is that's what we're shooting for. If we can get all the permitting done before snow flies, then we could have equipment ready, staged. The agreement with the Park District to let us dewater, and the approval of IDNR to let us dewater the sand right there on that parking lot, then we're not double trucking this stuff. So we get more sand out if we don't have to move it twice. I hope that makes sense. We got $1 million, so let's don't waste it on gas. So that's what we're working with the Park District on. And so that looks like we're gonna have something there too as well. They're very receptive, you know, because they got an amenity nobody can use. It's just a parking lot, not a boat ramp. So, Mr. Snipes.
Just to be somewhat creative, because we are moving the sand out of the river at some point. I also know that the river from time to time overflood. we're able to recycle that sand and put them in some sandbags and just give them to the people that's on the river. So that way, we are having another positive use of at least recycling that sand so it doesn't go to waste.
It's actually, I like the idea, but I don't know if you can return sand back to the river. I think they have to get it out of the floodplain, but it's up to the contractor who bids the hauling to dispose of the sand. We don't want to hold the sand. That's a big problem. If we just have a pile somewhere, because it blows, you know, that's not the business we want to be in. So the way these bids are written, whoever's trucking it away, they're charged with disposal. Mr. Featherling he's part of groups that had work done on the type of sand we have. It has almost no practical use in construction except for base sand underneath certain things. Yeah, you know that, but it's really it's too it's almost tumbled like polished like a stone. You know, it's really shiny stones because of obviously the river and the glaciers and all of that kind of stuff that created it. So that's part of the issue is it's not really good for much, you know, construction wise. So all right, but we're getting off topic. So the amount was $60,000 not to exceed, and including reimbursable expenses. Like I'd say, I would be surprised if we don't have some indication of what the project is in scope by the end of October, maybe beginning of November. That's what we're shooting for if we can get moving now. So any other questions? All right, roll call vote, please.
Mr. Hess.
Aye.
Mr. Tholen.
Aye.
Mrs. Pope.
Aye.
Mr. Snipes.
Aye.
Mr. Seroy.
Aye.
Mr. Lear.
Aye.
Mrs. Weber.
Aye.
Mrs. Peters.
Aye.
Mr. Fairfield.
Aye.
Mr. Carrico.
Aye.
Mr. Eckhoff.
Aye.
Mr. Featherling.
Aye.
Mr. Miller.
Aye.
Mr. Long.
Aye.
Mr. Kirkstra.
Aye.
Mr. Hunter.
Aye.
Ms. Hudson. Mr. Smith.
Aye.
Mr. Hildebrand.
Aye.
Mr. Raymond.
Aye.
Ms. Foster.
Aye.
Mr. Wheeler.
Aye. Motion carries. And by the way, the 60,000, it's our intent to include that in the appropriation, the $1 million, if you will. So if it ends up being outside of that, we'll get an approval probably. We'll have to decide general fund or if we want to do ARPA, but right now, we're under the impression that this can be included in that $1 million. So it won't even come out of the local sources of funds. So I just want to mention that. More to come on that, because as you know, sometimes you get an answer from one department in the state and then another department gets involved, Ben, and then all of a sudden the answer transitions. I don't know, what's the word they would use? It migrates. So we'll get on that though. Moving on, next item.
Operating agreement with the Metropolitan Planning Program and the Illinois Department of Transportation.
Do we have a motion and a second on that one? Ms. Weber, both Mr. Lear. Any questions about that? Ben's here, it's a formality, but, okay, are we spending money? No, I don't think so. It's, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. All right. Under ARPA, this part of a consent agenda, is there any one of those you want to talk about separately? Of 147 or 148? And 149 or 150? Is there any of those you want to talk about separately? All right, is there a motion to combine and approve then the consent agenda as presented? Mr. Long, Mr. Fairfield, if we could get those read into the record with obvious contractions.
Authorizing expenditure from fiscal year 2022, Fund 95, America Rescue Plan Fund, to Turner Freight Systems and to Limestone Township. And authorizing expenditure from fiscal year 2022, Fund 98, America Rescue Plan Lost Revenue Fund, to the Economic Alliance of Kankakee County and to the Economic Development Association.
All righty, Mr. Nugent is here. If anyone would like an explanation on what the housing study is, it might be good to hear that. What the planned use of that. Tim, would you want to explain that to the committee?
Sure. The use of the money is going to be for a housing study. We've been talking about, for several years as we go around to all our different employers, we find out that we've got a lot of people who are commuting into our community that would like to be residents, but we don't have adequate housing. Our housing industry took a real hit back about 12, 14 years ago, and it's never recovered. And we want to be able to do a housing study to be able to show the need for for new housing, new developments, different types of housing. So this housing study hopefully will give us the tools we can go to try to find outside developers that can come in here and not just build 2 or 3 or 4 homes a year, but to come in and actually do developments, build potential condos, apartments, facilities that have amenities. Those are the things that we're hearing that people want to have in the county. As we all know, real estate has really been tight over the last couple of years. There's not a lot of open real estate to go out and buy, so we think this is an opportune time to do this housing study, to get the ammunition that we need to go and entice developers to come to Kankakee County and build houses, build residences, build apartment complexes, so we can keep our employees in the county and turn them from commuters to residents.
Sure. And as an associated thing, I've heard people say, we don't want all these new residents, so not naysayers, but just people say, well, because we don't want to have to build more schools.
Right.
I remember us having a conversation, is our school enrollment down to the point where it's actually falling below the last time they built for the new growth, and so we have extra capacity in the schools is what I'm getting
correct.
at.
We've heard those same arguments, and so we did a survey of the school districts, and the school enrollment has continually declined over the last 10 to 12 years, and our school population has gone down several thousand. Now, it probably goes along with the fact that our population has declined, the school enrollment has declined, so facilities exist to be able to take more students without having to put anything back on the taxpayers that we have to build facilities. I've talked to a number of school superintendents, and they have plenty of facilities available to be able to house several hundred more students per school. So hopefully these new residents that we bring into the community won't impact the schools to have to do more construction.
Sure. Thank you. Mr. Snipes?
Yeah, I was finding that interesting because I was at the school board meeting last night, and Kankakee School District, even with all the new building, new additions, accommodates like 12. I think it was 1275. However, their enrollment has increased to over 15, almost 1,600. So they are experiencing a 300 increase. Is that a shift within the county, or is that causing individuals from coming out?
Most of the districts that we've surveyed, and we surveyed all of them, have all had declines over the last 10 to 12 years. Now, this Kankakee School District also had that, but just in the last couple of years, they've seen a change and their enrollment started to go up. Most of the districts have not seen that. Most of the districts in the community still are housing less students than they had back in 2008, 2009.
Yeah.
Thank you. I thought it warranted a little explanation why now in a down market, why would we look at a housing study? This is pretty much the right time to do it. Yeah. So we have a motion and a second. We ready for roll call vote? All right, roll call please.
Mr. Hess.
Aye.
Mr. Tholen. Aye. Mrs. Polk.
Aye.
Mr. Snipes.
Aye.
Mr. Seroy.
Aye.
Mr. Lear.
Aye.
Mrs. Weber.
Aye.
Mrs. Peters.
Aye.
Mr. Fairfield.
Aye.
Mr. Carrico. Mr. Eckhoff. Mr. Featherling. Mr. Miller.
Aye.
Mr. Long.
Aye.
Mr. Kirkstra.
Aye.
Mr. Hunter. Ms. Hudson. Mr. Smith.
Aye.
Mr. Hildebrand.
Aye.
Mr. Raymond. Ms. Foster. Mr. Wheeler.
Aye. Motions carry, I guess, or motion carries. Openings, please.
One opening on the Clawson Park Drainage District, one opening on the X-Line Creek Drainage District, one opening on the Pilot Township Fire Protection District, one opening on the St. Anne Fire Protection District, two openings on the Kankakee River Valley Forest Preserve District Board, two openings on the Canavan Drainage District, two openings on the Mantino No. 9 Drainage District, 6 openings on the Kankakee County Regional Planning Commission.
Thank you. We did have one item of new business that came up overnight. It's probably the best way to put it. It evolved overnight to being something that was a known quantity. I've spoken with Mr. Coughlin about this. We lost our AC over at the annex completely. Chiller's completely down, out. We have no air conditioning at the annex, which is probation, public defender. So I asked for, is this an emergency situation? Can we get a rental in there to keep the building cool while we go out and assess whether we're gonna have to repair or replace? We just can't let our employees work and you know, like, what was that, Cool Hand Luke, day in the box. You know, you can't let it be, you know, like that for our employees. So John agreed, and I believe he can speak to that if you have questions. So it would be the authorization to allow Wes to rent the chiller. We're not going to say the price because I want him to get second bids on this. I have one price from one company. So is there any questions? Or we'll start with a motion to allow him to run the daylight first. Mr. Eckhoff? Mr. Kirkstra, second.
Under the circumstances, I know that this has been an ongoing problem, and Wes has been trying desperately to try to keep everything going, which I appreciate. Yes, I make a motion, we approve the emergency cooling system for the annex building.
It's just the rental for now, and then we'll come back with some equipment once we figure that out. Wes, is that acceptable the way I'm bringing that to the board? I haven't seen you to talk about that this morning.
And just to, am I on? Just to provide some background, there's 2 compressors at the annex. We're currently running off 1. So right now on a day like today, we can manage because it's cool, humidity's low. But we all know what's gonna come later this month in August, and I even looked out in the 10-day. It doesn't look too bad going 10 days out, but I mean, I'm a former athlete, played football. It seemed like as soon as I put that helmet on, you know, it got to be 95, 100 degrees. And if we get that, the one compressor is just not gonna keep up. So I'm getting about 62 degrees out of the cooling side, which I like today is fine, but once it gets above 85, it starts getting pretty sticky in there. So
I make the motion that we go ahead.
Okay, we have the motion in a second on that. Any other thoughts, Mr.?
Discussion. Is there any way we can put a not to exceed number on it?
I
don't want somebody coming in and spending $1 million on a cooler for the unit, you know, for a building.
Right, but Wes already has one price and it's nowhere near that. I just don't want to talk about the number right now.
I got you.
That would work against us.
Got it.
Yeah. So it's substantially less than $1 million.
Which is, you know,
$1 million. Yeah. Mr. Snipes.
I would like to hear a brief narrative from Mr. Coughlin.
It's summer. It's hot. That's an emergency.
Brevity, I love it. All right, well, do we have a motion and a second? Can we roll call that, please, real quick?
Mr. Hess. Aye. Mr. Tholen. Mrs. Polk. Mr. Snipes.
Aye.
Mr. Seroy.
Aye.
Mr. Lear.
Aye.
Mrs. Weber.
Aye.
Mrs. Peters.
Aye.
Mr. Fairfield.
Aye.
Mr. Carrico.
Aye.
Mr. Eckhoff.
Aye.
Mr. Featherling.
Aye.
Mr. Miller.
Aye.
Mr. Long.
Aye.
Mr. Kirkstra.
Aye.
Mr. Hunter.
Aye.
Ms. Hudson.
Aye.
Mr. Smith.
Aye.
Mr. Hildebrand.
Aye.
Mr. Raymond.
Aye.
Ms. Foster. Mr. Wheeler.
Aye. Motion carries. Any other new business? Old business? Or other old business? Mr. Snipes? Almost.
No, just a point of information. We have an officer that's battling breast cancer and been doing it for about a good year, Officer Costello, and we are getting together to put a fundraiser because the COPA funds have, what is that? Not the COPA funds, but excuse me, COBRA funds are exhausted, and the American Cancer Society has picked it up for 2 months, and she has to go through another surgery even yet. So you'll probably hear me coming back to support the officer that's worked in our community and in our schools. And then also, if the board can, as well as others, continue to lend their prayers in her behalf as she battles this breast cancer.
Thank you. Was there somebody else that had something? I'm sorry, I apologize. Mr. Hess?
Make a motion to adjourn.
Second?
Second that. You'll say,
Second.
oh, you were first.
All those in favor say aye.
I
Those
could
opposed,
see.
same sign.